Chess in the slums of Kenya. We'll visit a neighborhood where young people playing this game of endless opportunities find hope for transforming their lives.
A public demonstration from Nigeria's National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, the NDLEA, models the country's firm stance in the war on drugs and its promising future in the fight.
African diaspora changing the face of U.S. politics. Meet Minnesota State Representative Esther Agbaje, a Nigerian American doing the work to support everyday people.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Jokai Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Our broadcast still looks a little different because of the global pandemic, but we truly appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Channels Television in Lagos brings you that story.
Nigeria's National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, the NDLEA, has publicly destroyed hard drugs worth over 50 billion naira in Abuja, the nation's capital. This action is to further strengthen the fight against illicit drug abuse in the country. President Muhammadu Buhari had earlier in the year inaugurated the War Against Drug Abuse, the WADA campaign of the NDLEA.
This heap of illicit drugs seized by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency in Abuja between 2019 and 2020 are to be burnt following court orders of forfeiture by those convicted and sentenced.
Drug abuse is a cankerworm eating our society today that must be collectively addressed.
They include cocaine, heroin, cannabis and psychotropic substances, all totaling 19,960.19 kilograms, valued at over 50 billion naira.
Comprising 19,178 kilograms of cannabis, 0.1 kilograms of cocaine, 0.9 kilograms of heroin, and 420 kilograms of other psychotropic substances.
He also gives a rundown of seizures and arrests made by the agency between January and November 2021.
We have mopped up over 3 million kilograms of illicit drugs and psychoactive substances in the country. We have arrested 10,355 traffickers, with at least 1,000 of them in jail, while others are going through trials in the various federal high courts in the country.
It's time for the destruction of the items, and the representative of the NDLEA chairman leads the guests for the exercise.
Hey! Move
To further strengthen the fight against illicit drug in the nation's capital, the NDLEA says it will soon commence an anti-drug project which will involve owners of bars, parks and gardens.
What we try to do now with the Abuja City project is to involve and engage all the gardens, parks, recreation centers and hospitality industries such as hotel, bars and clubs by ensuring that our anti-drug notices which raise drugs and substances are not allowed in these premises.
It's not the first time NDLEA will be destroying assorted illicit drugs such as this, but the agency says it remains undeterred in ending illicit drug trafficking in Nigeria. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Joining us to discuss this is the Director, Media and Advocacy, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, Mr. Femi Babafemi. Glad to have you today on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
So your agency has been making progress in arresting couriers and seizing hard drugs, especially at the nation's airports. Can you give us an assessment of the crackdown so far?
Yeah, I would like to start by going back to January this year when the new chairman, chief executive of the agency, in person of General Mohammed Buba Marwa, retired, was appointed to lead the nation's fight against drug abuse and illicit drug trafficking. And I remember that when he came on board, he did say that the new operational philosophy of the agency would be offensive action. Offensive action means taking the battle to the doorsteps and the hideouts of the various cartels operating within the country, whether at the airports, seaports, land borders, in the forest. And that's exactly what we've seen in the last 11 months. Over this period, we've seen arrests of over 10,000, precisely 10,355 traffickers. That is huge. And from this, we've been able to recover over 3.1 million kilograms of assorted illicit drugs. That is also huge. Across the country in the last 11 months, huge seizures, destruction of cannabis farms, hundreds of hectares of cannabis farms have been destroyed, and those that could be evacuated were evacuated and brought into warehouses for public destruction. And that's exactly one of the things we did recently. That was just earlier this week in Abuja here, where over about 20,000 kilograms of assorted illicit drugs were publicly destroyed and burnt.
Right, so with all of this, it seems the suppliers are still undeterred, because if you make arrests every now and then, that means they keep trying to succeed at what they're doing. So what other strategies are in place to stop the supply chain from taking illicit drugs to their final destinations?
Yeah, one of the things we've been able to do to further strengthen our deterrence effort is now we don't just go after them. We've had quite a number of them. Like I told you, we have had over 10,000 arrests this year alone. Out of this, we have about 5,000 cases in court, out of which over 1,000 of them have been convicted and are serving jail terms at the moment. Now, beyond taking these people to court, sending them to jail, and beyond seizing the drugs, which they would have invested quite a lot of money in, we also go after their assets. In monetary value, what we've been able to take from them this year alone, that is the drugs and cash seized from them, is worth over 120 billion naira. That is also huge. Just imagine what that would do in the hands of these criminal cartels if that had been allowed to go into their hands. The agency is also at the moment also working hard with the other stakeholders, especially the National Assembly, to make sure that the enabling act of the agency is amended in a way that will give some aspects, especially the sentencing, some deterrence, more deterrence impact, in a way that we will not be having the option of fine that we have at the moment, because we believe that if these people are really, if the sentencing really hits them hard, their assets are seized, especially if they will have to go for life imprisonment, or they will have to serve as much as 25 years in prison. Maybe that would also deter them. So we've been able to mop up all their traffickers from the streets. We're mopping them up, seriously. Beyond that, we're also targeting the barons themselves, because don't forget that these people, they create a lot of layers to insulate themselves, so that you have in one single operation, we could arrest as many as 5, 6, 10 traffickers, layers, for the same, the same single operation. We've been able to arrest, I know this year, not less than 6 of these barons. We've had a top politician in Lagos. We had another one from Brazil coming in. That one actually even paid some of our operatives thousands of dollars to be able to escape it, but then is facing trial at the moment.
Indeed, I'm afraid we must end it there. Thank you so much for your time today. Director, Media and Advocacy, NDLEA, Mr. Femi Babafemi.
Thank you again for having me.
Visually impaired people too often struggle to get ahead, especially in developing countries, including Zimbabwe. But Zimbabwe recently appointed its first visually impaired judge to the country's High Court bench. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare, Zimbabwe.
46-year-old Samuel Deme made history when he became the first Zimbabwe's visually impaired person to make it to the country's High Court. After he lost his sight at the age of 6 because of measles, he says he did not want to continue depending on his peasant farmer parents. He worked hard to excel at school until he earned 2 law degrees at the University of Zimbabwe. His drive, fear of failure, and a need to escape poverty.
I was also aware that if I miss doing good at school, the next thing would be on the streets begging for assistance. Those fears of the unknown were major drivers of myself to do better in society, to ensure that I ran away from poverty.
Visually impaired 27-year-old Darlington Nkomazana, who works as a researcher at the Judiciary Service Commission of Zimbabwe, says the appointment of Deme as a High Court judge demonstrates that there is room for everyone and that Deme's achievement has inspired him and revived his childhood wishes to become a judge.
And as a pioneer, he has demonstrated that even those who will come, they will be able to do the same. So I think it's just opened a way for many who are to come, who may have aspirations to be judges.
Leonard Marange, director of the Federation of Organizations of Disabled People in Zimbabwe, says the appointment of Deme is a positive example for the community.
So for government to have considered him for such an esteemed position, we're quite excited. And of course, we want more to be done, but this is a very gigantic step in the right direction.
Chikwana stressed that merit-based appointments open space for equal opportunities.
It's not a favor to these two gentlemen. It's because they have the capacity and they are capable. That's why they are occupying the positions that they are occupying.
Deme says his appointment shows people aspiring to higher government offices that hard work eventually pays off. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
A physically challenged Egyptian in Cairo, Egypt, is helping people with similar disabilities experience easy mobility by offering them comfortable means of transportation in a country where millions of disabled people struggle with accessibility. Joe says their company's goal and vision is to ensure people with disabilities live normal lives without being a burden to anyone.
His diagnosis of multiple sclerosis back in 2006 and his reduced ability to carry out daily tasks was what got Yo Yagmor thinking of ways to facilitate his transport across his hometown, Cairo. Yagmor, who now moves in a wheelchair, used to rely mainly on the help of his family and friends to run errands due to a lack of alternatives and infrastructure set up to assist people like him in Egypt. But his new company, Rakti, which he founded in 2019, offers the opportunity to people with disabilities to independently move around without much help.
The
idea behind Rakti is that we provide comfort and freedom in transportation to people like me, people with disabilities. We are not limited in the places we go.
A quick phone call 24 hours ahead is all that is needed to book a ride for the duration of the customer's choice. The company so far has 2 vehicles designed to securely fit wheelchairs. Yahwa and his co-founder Khalid Nasser are working on a minibus that can transport up to 20 passengers in wheelchairs at a time.
We currently have 2 vehicles and a minibus that can take up to 20 people in wheelchairs. Our goal and vision is for people with disabilities to live a very normal life without being a burden onto anyone, but instead become productive and work, maybe even with us in the company. because nobody knows better than us what service we need.
Customers like Rafiq Aziz says the company has made his mobility easy to run his errands. The company also aims to hire people with disabilities to work with them because, according to Yagmo, nobody better than us knows what services we need.
It's time for a short break. As we do, we remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come on the program, a young Somalian film director paints the childhood story of growing up poor in Nairobi with big dreams of stardom.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. In Kenya, many young people who live in Nairobi's low-income neighborhoods are lured by drugs and crime. In one neighborhood, a group is using the game of chess to help transform the lives of young people. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Nairobi.
Sarah Mumanyi is a chess player in Mukuru kwa Njenga, one of Kenya's informal settlements. At 15, she's a teen sensation in the sport, but her start wasn't easy.
When I started playing chess, it was hard because I was like the only girl, and my grandmother she never supported me because of playing with boys. It was really hard.
It's been 5 years since a sports outreach ministry introduced chess to this informal settlement to help keep young people away from drugs and crime. Every Saturday, the students here practice the game for 5 hours. The sport has provided a safe avenue for Mumanyi and other young residents to hone and perfect their skills. The chess initiative has drawn about 800 students from various schools within Mukuru kwa Njenga, which has a population of about 500,000 people. Josephat Owila is a national chess instructor and head coach with the Sports Outreach Ministry.
Socially, they are good because they can be able to coexist with others in the society. Also, in their schools, their respective school, they are performing well, which means that they are critical thinkers and they are creative also.
John Mukabi, the head of Chess Kenya, the national body that manages the sport, told VOA the sport faces challenges in the country.
For these informal settlement areas like here in Mukuru kwa Njenga, they don't have internet connection. They need laptops and things like that, and also chessboards.
Still, the young residents play the game despite obstacles. As for Mumanyi, she continues to practice every day and hopes to one day become a grandmaster. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
As cinema returns to Somalia, a young film director, Ahmed Farah, rides the wave in an upcoming film, Ayanle. The film features a Somali actor living in a poor neighborhood in Nairobi with a tall dream of a breakthrough role in Hollywood. The film, the first in 3 decades, is due for release in February in Somalia's war-ravaged capital, Mogadishu.
Somali-Dutch director Ahmed Farah wrote the movie based on scams he saw while working as a news cameraman for international TV network.
I came across a lot of interesting stories. Stories that you hear when the camera is off. And for those years, I used to collect those stories. And some of them were even better than fiction. And those stories happen different places in Africa. And I wanted to tell a story that people, especially from same background, same region, can identify with. So I had to find, how to put that all together and make a movie out of it.
Stay strong, brother. Allah will reward you.
It took Farah 8 years to write, finance, and shoot the movie, and the East Lake community rallied around the film by donating refreshment or home-to-use assets. The police helped by offering cars and let Farah into the local jails as a replica set. U.S. Somali actor Bakada Diraman, who acted in Hollywood movie Captain Phillips and starred in Kenya's Oscar-winning short film Watu Wote, plays Ayanle. It says most of the crew and actors had experienced the kind of police harassment shown by the film. and many were nervous about publicly acting like terrorists, especially when police were around.
We kind of had the situation, and when we were filming in Illicit, there were a scene where we were training as Al-Shabaab members, and some of the cops was taking photos, and the cast were very uneasy, and I can sense it. So I asked them what's going on, and they were like, if those cops took our pictures, and later when this film is done, they'll come and interrogate us and put us in jail, whatever, the same situation the main character, Ayane, went through.
For Farah, the most exciting thing about the movie is the blossoming of Somali cinema and the chance to show more than pirates, refugees, militants, and war.
The different diaspora groups that make up the United States inevitably have fought for representation through the voting process. VOA is profiling a group of emerging politicians with direct ties to Africa who are changing the face of American politics. One is Esther Agbaje, whose parents came from Nigeria.
My name is State Representative Esther Agbaje. I represent House District 59B, which covers downtown Minneapolis and parts of North Minneapolis. It's a pretty vibrant district. It's got diversity in its economic classes, and it's got diversity in its ethnic groups and racial groups. And it's really just a fun place to live, and I'm really happy to be their representative. My parents came to the United States in the 1980s. They both immigrated from Nigeria, and they both actually came to Minnesota to attend the University of Minnesota, which is where they met. I have always had jobs that were in this space of helping people or ensuring that people had the resources they needed to do something better for themselves. So one thing that I was interested in was how do we help more people at once? Often that means going to a lever of government. So that was why I was always keen on the idea of running for office. The opportunity arose for the 2020 cycle, and I jumped at it.
I was born and raised right here in Minnesota, and I am passionate about representing 59B because I want to build the most inclusive district in our state.
Very big difference between campaigning and legislating. When you're campaigning, you're very full of ideas, and you're full of hope, and you're full of vision, which stays with you once you start legislating. But there becomes now, in Minnesota, we have a total of 201 legislators between our House of Representatives and our Senate. And so you are just one of 200 other people that you have to convince to be able to bring your idea and your constituents' ideas into fruition to create policy and change. So there's much more negotiating once you become a legislator.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Agbaje. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This pandemic has exacerbated the problems that we have in housing. And this bill, though not everything we want, will mitigate kind of the worst of those problems, particularly for people who have lost their jobs and cannot afford the rent.
A lot of people talk about the pandemic, saying the pandemic showed the inequalities and inequities in our society. All the pandemic did was just shine a brighter light on them. We have been dealing with a housing crisis in Minnesota for years. And that is one of the things that I actually want the state of Minnesota to be bold and step forward on how do we provide dignified, adequate housing for all members of our society.
Well, I think about all the work you've done on housing in particular. Just being able to see it all the way through from the perspective you have is so valuable. Because without that, we're not going to get the solutions that people actually need.
As a legislator, it's definitely eye-opening to see the challenges, but also the opportunities across the state of Minnesota. And I think that many of my fellow legislators or decision makers, especially those with immigrant backgrounds, can also see those same challenges and opportunities. And we welcome collaboration with anyone.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. To remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joker Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.